Good morning. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful spring day. I'm Richard Hall and I'm Director of Future South, and I'm also Business Development Manager for Green Tech South, the innovation and technology cluster for clean growth companies set up by Future South. It gives me great pleasure to introduce my fellow director, Dr. David Hutchinson, who is delivering the first in a series of thought leadership talks designed to stimulate discussion and ultimately action in delivering a net zero carbon economy for our region. David has many hats. He's the Dean in the Faculty of Technology at the University of Portsmouth, and he is also currently chair of the Research England funded project Clean Growth UK. David was a founder of Future South, previously known as Future Solent, set up many years ago. He's been vice chair of Future South and is proud that as a partnership, 250 clean growth jobs, helps establish the Hampshire Community Bank with over 200 businesses on low carbon innovation projects, and created Green Tech South, the innovation and technology cluster, the first energy and environment accredited cluster in the UK, and the only UK member of the International Clean Tech Network. David is also a director of Green Tech South, along with his other jobs. David lives on the Isle of Wight with his young family, and he's been one of the key drivers in creating a thriving ecosystem of green initiatives on the Isle of Wight. I'm going to pass over to David now, but please mute your microphones, ask questions through the chat function, and we will pick these up at the end of David's talk. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Richard. I guess thumbs up if you can hear me. Excellent. Right, so let's crack on then. Thank you for that very kind introduction. I think some people are still joining as you were giving it, which gives me an excuse to go over some of it again. Not the stuff about me. I don't like all that stuff very much, but some of the stuff that we've achieved, I think, is important to note. Okay, bit of an experiment. So I'm talking to you from my garden shed in Ryde. As Richard said, live on the island, have done since I moved to the south of England, knowing nothing about the Isle of Wight, and found it a delightful place to be for the last 10 years. And yeah, these are kind of the musings of an academic and an island resident, and by no means am I claiming to have anywhere near all the answers. Maybe some of the answers, or at least we've begun on the path to finding out some of the answers. But as with most things, we probably end up generating more questions. The more questions we ask, and the more digging we do. But that's kind of the point of this little experiment, I think. So hopefully, there we go. So Richard kind of covered this, so which is helpful. So Future South, futuresouth.org. You can check us out. You can find out who the current board is, and the membership are, and you can just see some of the things we've achieved over the last 8 years or so. But ultimately, we've set out initially as Future Solent, then as Future South, to really demonstrate. And I would say, although I'm part of a university and we do have universities represented on the board, we have always been and intend to remain so a business-led organisation with representation from the other parts of that important triple helix, so universities, the knowledge base, and local government. And we've secured a whole load of cash for businesses in the region. We've brought in significant levels of inward investment now. I think we're probably up to about 40 million, created over 250 jobs, and helped over probably 150 businesses now. And that's something of which we're very proud and which we will continue to do. And obviously, I'm always there also waving the Isle of Wight flag. I mean, not literally, that would make me seem very strange, but you know, I'm always, you can ask my fellow board members, but I'm always keen to bring any benefits that we are trying to accrue to the island. So if any of this strikes a chord, or you know somebody that might be interested in any of the stuff that I've got to talk about, then do let them know. I would be delighted to have more and more island organisations and island businesses joining us. So Future South, we've had a bit of a refresh. Again, all that's contained on the website. And as part of that, earlier in the month, we published via our chair, Ben L from Southern Water, a press release. And as part of that, we said, well, why not run a kind of a monthly webinar series, a bit of a thought leadership piece. Let's start with transport in June. Hold on, says I. If we're publishing the press release in May, why don't we just go straight in there and do something in May? So here I am, having opened my big mouth. So I'm sort of kicking it off, but we've got a whole series of things planned, I think on the last Wednesday of every month at 11 o'clock. So hopefully this is the beginning of something of interest. But effectively, as a group, we are seeking to support what we can as zero carbon, low carbon we started, but we're moving to zero carbon innovations, but recognizing that it's important that we support both the resilient economy and an enhanced quality of life. And we've got various mechanisms that I won't go into now that we seek to deliver that by, and this is building on that heritage and that history that we already have. Right, so some context from my point of view. I trained, my first degree was in ecology, so I still might see myself as an ecologist, although I've strayed a long way from quadrats and field work. This is a guy who I often come back to and have ever since I found out about him. For such inspirational words, I always find it quite frustrating that he said all this pre-1948 and here we still are, but that's just the way it is. But so there are some that can live without wild things and some who cannot. So I'm in the latter category there, and it's somewhere I go, and certainly in lockdown I'm finding new places on the island that I find fantastic. Particularly now that we can travel to go and see them. But the truth is, so we of the minority see a law of diminishing returns in progress. So ever since I can remember, I see the numbers and hear about some of the stuff going on with the natural environment, and I find it quite distressing. But the truth is, even now, people like myself are in a minority, and there are many people, and there's no judgment here, but there are many people who just don't see it as a priority or an urgency. I think perhaps increasingly there are larger numbers in that category. But the very fact that, Aldo Leopold said some of this stuff pre-1948, and we're still talking about the threat of climate change, of disappearance of species, the loss of biodiversity, kind of tells you that, for whatever reason, and there are many, and it's very complicated, but for whatever reason, we are still in a situation where those of us that care very deeply, again, for whatever reason, about these things are generally in the minority. But that's the context of where I come from. And just to make that point, I suppose, just last Saturday, this is one of the highest points on the island, Luckham Down, and I was up there, and actually that's the first time I've actually made it up that way and onto Boniface Down, and sort of over here you can see the cliff. So this is sort of Shanklin Sandown Bay, for those of you who know the island, and it's just fantastically beautiful, and it was food for the soul. It's that sort of stuff. But as you pan around with me, some soul thought it was okay to leave a blue plastic bag full of dog poo left in a gorse bush. Again, you may be judging them. I'm not doing it for that, but just we are in the minority, still right up there. It's such a beautiful spot. It's okay to do something like that. Likewise, while I've been cycling up around Beeper Shoot, some beautiful bluebell woods all over the island, but somebody had seen fit to dump, I think it's about 5 black plastic bags and an empty suitcase in the woods. So, you know, I struggle to understand the mentality of people that think that that's okay, but the fact is that it's still in existence, it's still happening. So we are generally still quite a long way from this zero carbon economy, I suppose. I guess that's the context and just where I'm personally coming from. And I thought it's always important to understand that. Right, bit of audience participation. I've got a little quiz for you. If you've got a pen and paper in front of you, fantastic. If not, it's not that complicated and you can probably remember. But there's about 4 slides here, and I'm just going to ask you a series of questions, and I need you to answer A, B, and C. There will be no, sadly, no prizes, but equally no repercussions to this either. Yeah, it's up to you how you answer. So, on water use, do you, A, shower at least once a day, B, have a bath maybe once or twice a week, or C, think that people are too obsessive about personal hygiene? A, B, or C? So if you just come up with an answer and just jot down just how many A's, how many B's, and how many C's you're going with. In terms of food choices, do you insist on meat with almost every meal? Do you eat mostly vegetarian food? Or do you buy only locally produced organic food? So A, B, or C. In terms of your electricity consumption, are you someone that always leaves computers and TVs on standby, or your household? Do you usually switch off the lights when you leave a room, or do you use only renewable power sources? So again, A, B, or C. Always leave computers and TVs on standby, usually switch off the lights when you leave a room, or C, use only renewable power sources. And then in terms of travel, do you usually take the car where you go? Particularly thinking about pre-lockdown, obviously, and maybe just how you get to work or college or school or whatever. So do you usually take the car, A? Do you usually take the bus or train, B? Or do you usually walk or cycle to work or college? Obviously, there's some of us on the island that may take a marine form of transport. So you can class that as a bus or a train. Be it a ferry or a hovercraft or whatever. Okay, so A, B, or C. And I think this is the last one. Do you never use recycling facilities? Do you follow local recycling guidance best you can? Or C, do you minimize on waste and maximize on reuse? So again, A, B, or C. Right, so for everyone you scored A, give yourself 10 points. For everyone you scored B, give yourself 5 points. And for everyone you scored C, give yourself 0 points. So all the A's, 10 points, all the B's, 5 points, and any C, 0 points. And just tot up in your head how much you scored. I'm not going to embarrass anybody by asking them what they scored. And I realize this is incredibly simplistic, but it's just a little thought experiment. Okay, so I asked you questions about different areas of your lifestyle. Right, if you manage to score, and generally what will happen is, I would think for the most part, even in an audience like this, you'll score between about 25 and 30. But if you scored 0 to 20, you've got little feet. So if everybody lived a lifestyle like yours, we would only need one planet for everybody to exist. The average score is probably somewhere around 20 to 35, and you need up to 2 planets to support everybody with a lifestyle like yours. And anyone with big feet need probably 3 planets or so. So that's 35 or more points. Obviously, we don't have 2 or even 3 planets, and that's kind of the point. And generally in a room, yeah, you'll average about two planets. Increasingly impact in an audience like this, we'll have quite a lot of people that are managing now to live in a way that is more, as we would call, sustainable. But there will still be people for various reasons that are using quite a lot of resource. And many of you will have heard of this, I'm sure, but there is a point in the year called Earth Overshoot Day, and that's where we have nominally and effectively used the resources available for that year, and then the rest of the time kind of living on resources that are, I guess, we're borrowing from future generations. And that's been running since the 1970s, and there's a graph. Every scientist likes a graph. But roughly, and again, there's lots of caveats to this and assumptions, but roughly in the early 70s, the resource consumption indicated that we could probably get away with 1 planet's worth of resources, and a bit like that example, we're on about 1.75 to 2 planets. And it'd be interesting to see what happens this year. And there is a competition being run for households, those of you that are homeschooling, to try and guess when Earth Overshoot Day might be this year. So it was roughly around August the 1st last year, and it was just into so it was nearly a whole 12 months when we would go back to the 1970s. And if you Google Earth Overshoot Day, you can access much more complicated calculators and do that properly and all the rest of it. But I guess even with an assembled crowd like this, and if we were in a room together and I asked for a show of hands, I'd wager that yeah, we're probably maybe doing a bit better than average, but we're still collectively probably using more resources than 1 planet's worth. And that is what it is, and that's why we need innovation and technological solutions to go alongside behavior change and cultural change and all the rest of it. So I want to say a little bit about some of the causes for that, and then jump onto some of the stuff that we're doing both here on the island and just across the water. Again, it's something I've used for a long time now, but effectively the planet is under enormous pressure from lots of, it's complicated and it's complex and from lots of different areas, and I guess that's why we are still where we are. And so I'll touch on biodiversity because as an ecologist, and I've already explained the concept, you know, I enjoy the natural environment. I appreciate the natural environment. I think around systems and how ecosystems function and why they're important. But actually, it all boils down to the individual components of those systems. If you're an engineer, then you might think about, well, in the old days anyway, before digitization, cogs and things. Now it's chipboards, but it's the same thing. It's a series of elements that work together to do something for us. So I mean, you could go further and talk about genetic diversity, but let's go for just the unit of species. So biological diversity, and we know about these. You know, extinctions happen. They happen naturally. We know about the big extinctions. There have been 5, big periods in the Earth's history where things have gone, extinct on a huge scale, and some say we're in the 6th mass extinction now. But if you look at the past in the fossil record, and obviously with the Isle of Wight, we're blessed with having an amazing resource to access fossils themselves. But we know from the fossil record the kind of natural background rate of extinction, and don't really worry about the numbers, but it's the 2 black rectangles on the left-hand side. And then, because of the Victorians, again, strong link to the island, Queen Victoria loved the place. They built Osborne House, and obviously she died there too. But they had a huge penchant for collecting stuff and putting it in drawers. It's just the way that they catalogue the world. And if any of you have been behind the scenes of the Natural History Museum in London or elsewhere, there are just drawers and drawers of and jars full of things that were collected by the Victorians. But from that activity, we can kind of get a handle on how many species may have gone extinct over the last 100 years. And it's somewhere in a factor of 10 higher than it would be naturally according to the fossil record. And then the one on the right hand side, that's not happened. That's what, you know, it's a rough guess from scientists as to what may happen given all those pressures that I alluded to just a moment ago. And it gets really quite serious, and we just don't know. We have no idea what's going to happen at that level. There's various theories about how an ecosystem works, different models. You know, is it dependent on a few species, or is it just a combination of things? And after a certain point, the whole thing stops working. And you know, we have many examples of where ecosystems have stopped working on an island scale, or in coral reefs, you have phase shifts into different types. So you lose the coral and you get lots of algae, all sorts of examples. You know, the thing is, I suppose, not only do we not know how many species there are on the planet, we just don't have any idea. We don't fully appreciate, and no doubt it varies in different places, but you know, how the system really works. So with those two things in mind, I always come back to a guy called Aldo Leopold. And before I do, actually, I'll just touch on this. So I always find this quite useful as well, and quite eye-opening. So I'll just run through this briefly. But you know, the planet has been around for 4.6 billion years, and if you took that 4.6 billion years of history and squeezed it into 24 hours, you kind of see, it gives you an appreciation for what came along when. So up here at 0 or 24, the Earth was formed. Life came along probably about 4 a.m., but very, very simple stuff, you know, that you wouldn't really think of as life. Not till probably around 8 a.m. do you get something that you could probably trace everything back to some sort of universal ancestor. Bacteria starts to produce oxygen, quite important. So this is very inhospitable all the way till 9 a.m. Still pretty inhospitable. Only around 11 a.m. Do we get to a point where there's enough oxygen in the atmosphere that the oceans and the land have stopped kind of capturing it, and so the atmosphere starts to fill with oxygen. And not till, so all the way around from then till 6 o'clock, so 18 hours from the beginning, do we start to get the first plant life, probably in the form of green algae. So that gives you an idea. So for the first 18 hours of the Earth's life, lots is happening, but you know, nothing of biological note, as it were. I mean, you could argue that life in itself is quite notable, but anyway. And then there's a flurry of activity between 6 p.m. and about 11 p.m. and you get, you know, trilobites, insects, fish. Not till 9:20 to fish. Dinosaurs, they're not here till, you know, for us, that's a long time ago, about 10 to 11 at night. And actually, Homo sapien arrived at night, and modern humans have only been around for about 4 seconds. If you decrease the timeline of the Earth into 24 hours, then modern humans have been here for about 4 seconds of that 24 hours. And indeed, if you think about when all that pressure started, so probably Industrial Revolution, it's about 1,000th of a second ago. So if you think in terms of, I'm not bashing progress, I'm not bashing innovation. We have made incredible strides and achieved incredible things in less than 3 human lifetimes. And actually, this is one of the important elements of, I think, how we move ourselves on. But the point is that it's happened in terms of the Earth's history. The impact that humans have had on the planet has happened in an incredibly relative short space of time. And then we go and, you know, stick roads and footpaths and buildings up in the way of the natural world, and it starts to become incredibly difficult for it to respond to us, I suppose, and in timescales that are just geologically are not something that the planet has been used to. So I just find that quite useful in terms of something to think about. And I was at somewhere about 18 months ago with Sir David King, who was a chief scientist, who started this alternative SAGE group. But, you know, knows what he's talking about most of the time, I think. And lots of other people are saying this. He was just repeating things that others have also said. But, you know, we've probably got a decade. I mean, this was nearly 2 years ago, so let's say a decade. So what we do in the next 10 years, and we've been saying this for a long time, for my entire working life, but, you know, I think we've come to the crux now that if we don't, you know, find a way to get to net zero, to a zero carbon economy in the next decade, then we're going to have an impact for a long, long time on many generations. And just finally, I suppose, some of the crux of that is that it depends how we value the building blocks of ecosystems, that biological diversity. It does a lot for us, but we tend to take it for granted, or maybe we just don't realize. And there are cases, again, now, you know, you've got farmers in parts of China that are using ladders and paintbrushes to pollinate fruit trees. You've got crops in America where they're using mobile pollinators. And there's an economy that's growing up around providing bees to pollinate because there aren't enough left around the crop. I guess it depends very much on how we end up valuing biodiversity as to how much we have left at the end of it. And again, just because this is about, you know, provoking thought and response. This is not, you know, the circles don't mean anything, but if you take the boundary of the largest circle as where we are with, you know, we don't know how many species we've got, but, you know, the current level of biodiversity, then where will we be in 80 years' time, let's say? If we carry on as we are, then we will be much decreased in number of species. If we are able to consider some of the roles ecosystem services play, perhaps the more functional roles, you know, we might have a bit less. If we're able to just, so, you know, I said, you know, when I went up to Luckham Down, you know, food for the soul, if we're allowed to, if we can get to the point where we can consider some of the non-utilitarian values of nature, you know, that probably will be the point where we conserve or protect or manage to live with as much of the current level of biodiversity as exists now. No answers, just something to think about, and obviously we just don't know. We don't know at what point do ecosystems start to fail in a big way. We just don't know, and that's where, you know, if you're an engineer or something, again going back to Aldo Leopold, who I started this with, he said this: "Who but a fool would discard seemingly useless parts to keep every cog and wheel is the first precaution of intelligent tinkering." So if you're someone that likes to take things apart to see how they work, you're not then going to start just chucking bits away if you don't understand them, because you might be chucking away an important part. And that's, I guess, the crux of the precautionary principle. His full quote was that. But and I guess that's the last bit of context for me, is and where I come from. You know, we could spend a lifetime debating the science, and it's important that we draw conclusions and continue to measure. But in the meantime, I just come back to the precautionary principle, really. And, you know, why would you not just try and hold on to as much as you can? But I'm in a minority. I'm still in a minority with that sort of level of thought. Likewise, this is bandied about for a long time. I've used it for some time. I mean, I'm not even trying to get into the fact that, you know, there's a hoax going on, but, you know, if we do this, if we try and move towards a zero carbon economy, and some of you in lockdown, for all the devastation that COVID is causing, will start to, I'm sure, like me, have just had a bit more time to spend it with family, if you live with others, or just to go out for walks or cycling or whatever it might be. And actually, it's kind of win-win, because a lot of the stuff we talk about, irrespective of all those unknowns and all the rest of it, I think what we're trying to aim for in a zero carbon economy, for clean growth, whatever you want to call it, actually it's a better way of living all round, I think. But it's how you get there that's the important thing, and I think something that I'll look at for the latter part of the talk today. Now, we do have the Sustainable Development Goals, and I absolutely support those. Why would you not? I think the problem with the Sustainable Development Goals, or sustainable development in general, is that it's been set for, well, what is it, 1992, I think, the Brundtland Commission, when we started to talk about sustainable development in its current guise, and it's evolved since then. But it's set in the context of a linear economy, so that take, make, dispose, and that's, I think, one of the main reasons that it's so far a bit like conservation. It's not got to the point that, you know, with sustainable development, with conservation. I remember a professor when I was an undergraduate saying, you know, these are very strange jobs to be in, because actually what you're effectively trying to do is do yourself out of a job. We haven't got there yet, and no, we're not going to get there anytime in the next few years. But, you know, ideally, if you're working in the field of conservation or sustainable development or any of these things, then, you know, if you get it right, then there's no job to be had, because it's all working well. But yeah, this whole linear thing about take, make, dispose. So take something, buy it, throw it away. Set in that context, it's very difficult to see how something like sustainable development can operate. And people don't like being told to do more with less. Although, you know, it is a way to do it, then they don't like it. And so it doesn't work very well. You know, the average mobile phone, I think there's more mobile phones on the planet than people now. The average mobile phone use is 6 to 12 months. And there's lots of rare earth metals in there, but things like this are not designed to be reused. They're just designed to be thrown away. And so that brings me, and I'm not going to say a lot about this because there's other people that can say much, much better things about such things, but that brings me to this. And if you don't know, you should, but the epicenter for a lot of the thought that's certainly started and continues to come out of around this concept of circular economy comes out of the sail loft just by the chain ferry when it's working in Cowes, Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So Isle of Wight, this is one of the things Isle of Wight has in its rich and varied crown is all of this stuff around circular economy. There are some of the world's most knowledgeable people around this concept of circular economy that are based on the Isle of Wight. That's not to say that we can't do more as an island community in embracing these concepts, and any time I think the foundation has time to engage with the island community, I think that could only be a good thing. But for genuine reasons, you know, they are very focused and concentrated on having a global impact, but it does happen from the Isle of Wight. And I would urge you to just Google that and go to the website, and there's videos, and there's such a rich vein of very accessible material to talk through circular economy. But that's the first thing that came along 10 years ago now, at least for me, that I saw as a genuine solution and if you set that and the ideas of sustainable development goals into the concept of a circular economy, then I can absolutely see us getting somewhere in a way that we never have in the last 40 years. And I'm not sure about some of this diagram, but generally the thing on the left. So you're looking to create a closed loop system. So you're chucking away as little as possible. You're designing stuff. I was talking about the mobile phone. You're designing stuff to be reused. You're keeping stuff cycling. There's a technological cycle, a biological cycle. The biological cycle obviously is there anyway. The technological cycle isn't, but there are lots of examples of how it could be now on a sort of a product-based level at least, and it's shifting to that closed loop system. And there's lots of reports and lots of numbers that they've come up with, and big numbers: 48% reduction of carbon dioxide by 2030, €3,000 increase in disposable income for EU households. I mean, that's a big number, and actually that's something I'm going to come back to briefly in a second around something that we've been involved with. So I will park that and leave that there, but in the context of solutions, then we are a small island, but we have some great things going on, and I think also we have the potential to deliver some fantastic demonstrators to show, not only to benefit the island and the people that live here and the natural environment, but actually could demonstrate how things could be. I honestly think that, and I think I'd like to finish certainly on. I said at the beginning, don't claim to have all the answers. Probably end up with more questions than answers by the time I've finished. But I do think that collectively, I'd be interested in finding out what else is going on and what else is out there, just to see if my theory that the island is genuinely a place where we could be demonstrating how to do things, and not in a guinea pig, high risk way, but in a benefit to the island and the local economy way, but that does demonstrate to the UK and to the world that these things are possible, and that within 10 years we can genuinely have something that works all round. So yeah, think global, act local. There's some great things going on, and I'm not involved at all with the biosphere work, but I recognise that as an important component here. And I've mentioned the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, but the other stuff, Future South, that's why I'm here for the webinar, but also Clean Growth UK, even got the t-shirt, look, and Green Tech South, of which I'm the director. These are things that we are doing and working towards, that I think can be one part of the jigsaw. So I'm going to say something very briefly, just as an advertisement for my team and the really important work that they're doing around Green Tech South, and then finish on an example of a project that I've been working with that I'd just be keen to get feedback on, I think. So Green Tech South's been around since about 2014, I think, and we've grown and been part of a minority voice, I think, but an important one in the region. And we're seeking to support business, primarily small business, small and medium-sized enterprises. Although the medium bit of SME is not actually that small in many cases, but it's a reasonable turnover, or what sounds like one anyway. But we provide lots of stuff. Access to funds we know is really important. Business support. We run events. We facilitate engagement with knowledge. There's academia there, but knowledge partners. And provide increasingly effective access to national and international networks. I'll say something about an example of a funding stream in a moment. The business support element, you can check out on the website, greentechsouth.com, and indeed greentechsouth.com/business-support. I think there's a link somewhere, but you can even fill in a form and get somebody to call you back. There's all our events are listed there, and there's all sorts of things from very practical workshops around innovation support to webinars like this. Academics, not always the answer, first to admit that, but often it is useful to be able to access expertise or facilities that cost a lot of money or you just don't have access to. And then we are part of a number of networks, both in the UK through Clean Growth UK, of which we're the Southwest Hub, or the International Clean Tech Network, which is on the next slide, or indeed the Solar Impulse Foundation, where we are linking the expertise in the region through our SMEs to large corporates and other SMEs across the world, who are all looking at this. The key point is this transition to a zero carbon economy. In terms of the International Clean Tech Network, so here we are, Green Tech South, but there's members from across the planet, South Africa, a couple in Canada, Argentina, lots in Europe, some real great leaders, our friends Clean in Denmark, and through that network we're generating, I think, some really interesting impact around how we support SMEs, how we transition to the zero carbon economy, and indeed post-COVID, how are we going to support SMEs to not only get back up on their feet from after such an intense period, but potentially remaining or joining this different way of doing things. In terms of, I did say I'd say something about the access to finance. In terms of access to finance, again, go to the web link and have a look. But we have a couple of very small, but in some cases helpful pots of money to support innovation, research and development. In some cases, energy efficiency grants, but also to provide innovation support for business. We've got a couple of projects. Emphasize, which is the bottom one in orange, is up and running, going well. Low carbon solar will be coming very soon to I don't know, it's just coming very soon. But these can give away small grants, and my colleagues can say more about that another time. But what's really exciting for me is that we're growing, working with an increasing number of businesses new to us, many of them new to us, to help them in these various aspects and to provide, in some cases, cash to help them with that. And that's exciting because it's hard. It's hard for SMEs to find the time to engage with us, and it's hard for us to find the SMEs. But as government keep telling us, it's the SMEs are the lifeblood of the nation's economy. And so we need to find ways to work with them, and in our case, to work with them to move towards as rapidly as possible this zero carbon economy. And I'd really love for that to have a plastering of Isle of Wight businesses. So if you're an Isle of Wight business and this is all new to you, then do make contact. Please do. And I have a fantastic team, and they are brilliant, and they will get back in touch and listen to what your needs are, and wherever possible, seek to find the right solution for you. So that's one of the things that I'm personally involved with, but has been born out of activity from Future South, from a previous government grant, and we've kept that and built a legacy, and now we're leveraging in other funds to continue that work to support SMEs in this way. So all of this boils down to one thing. This is probably something that's just, I found funny. So not all of you will laugh like I did. I've got a strange sense of humour. Many will admit that. But in the last 5 minutes, a lot of what I talk about, I started life as an ecologist. I'm a systems thinker. I think about systems. It's about the big picture. And I completely get that, and I've said this already, we are one part of the jigsaw. And I talk specifically today about the island, but it can apply to the mainland or any other society. But I think the island is special. I am biased, I will admit it, but I think we do have something to offer, and indeed to do for ourselves. but it's very easy to work in silos. It's kind of human behavior to do so. And you get really caught up, quite understandably, with your own thing and concentrating on the thing that you feel is important. And you know, in this case, you know, all these people are identifying different things, but it's actually an elephant. It's just that they, you know, they can't. So I think recognizing there's a big picture, I think collectively coming up with what that big picture looks like, or should look like, and then finding ways to work together towards that goal are really important. But all of this boils down to that, and just seeing that, whatever that might look like, that big picture. So I'm going to finish on this thing that we did, and we've reached a bit of an end point, not an end point, crossroads, a T-junction, I don't know, whatever you want to use. And I guess I'm looking for potential input. But about 18 months ago, we formed a consortium. It was led by the Isle of Wight Council, and they were brilliant. Jim Fawcett at the Isle of Wight Council was fantastic, and led us all very capably. We joined with some big companies like E.ON, some little companies, a couple of universities, a couple of companies there, Future Isle of Wight and Wight Community Energy, that are very much island based and community driven. And we were working together, and we submitted this, you know, large document with many pages, and some learned professionals looked at it and commented on it and said, yes, we think this is worth some money. So they gave us £109,000 and from a particular pot that the government had at the time, and said, take 6 months to do, you know, an initial scoping study to flesh out your ideas. So that's what we did, and we'd already identified that on the island, you know, we are an island, but we are dependent for many things, water, electricity, energy, on the mainland. Should that always be the case? Should we be able to get to a point, I mean, on a day like today, you know, the numbers will tell you we'll be generating right now huge amounts of electricity, more than we probably need right now. But, you know, there are challenges around that, and here are some of those challenges. So, sorry, if you're not on the island and it's raining, I'm pointing up at a blue sky outside the window, and as we know, it's the sunniest place in the United Kingdom, but we can't tell you that because they got rid of the weather station. But anyway, or the official one. Right. So increasingly, we're faced with high fuel costs. There are large parts of the island that are in energy poverty. So that was an issue at the time. The cost of connection, if you wanted to set up another solar farm, was completely prohibitive. Some would allege that that's now been reduced, but there's not much evidence yet that that's changed the way things are on the ground. There was energy is a very complicated thing, and the transport thereof is complicated, and so, you know, we were seeing curtailment at times, and effectively we weren't able to generate much more in terms of electricity. We needed probably a storage solution, but that's not easy. Electricity, this particular solar is obviously dependent on the sun, and it's generating peaks, and it's generated at times when you don't necessarily need it, whether that's interseasonal or in between days or weeks or whatever. So it's just lots going on, and it doesn't quite fit with the way we need to use it. So lots of challenges, and you've seen those now on the left hand side. And we've come up with various theories and things that we wanted to test in this project, and that's what they gave us the money for, to some degree. But we definitely knew that we wanted something that made the community, or ensured that the community was in control, that significantly reduced energy use and costs, definitely costs, and that we wanted to design and develop a sort of a smart and flexible local energy system, which we, you know, trips off the tongue now, but, you know, we called Energy Autonomous Community, open bracket, Isle of Wight, close bracket. But anyway, got the money. Wasn't a huge sum of money, but it got us some money. And this is where we were coming from to start with. So we were very much focused on the home, and starting with the home and how you reduce energy in the home, and then linking it with local energy generation, and maybe doing some clever trickery with the energy network and maybe the grid and some flexibility and stuff. And that's where most people start. And we did it on a smaller section. We said this is all a desk-based study. There's no engineering in process. But we kind of focused in on an area of West White that had about a small subset of the island itself, but had a number of the elements that we would seek to test. And I think that went really well, and we came up with some ideas. But what we realised is if we're going to do this, we couldn't. It's very hard to do from the place that we were coming from by focusing purely on the reduction of energy cost and indeed use, by concentrating exclusively on the home. And actually we knew, going back to the elephant, and we were confident in the fact that there was a bigger picture, and what we actually need to do is involve not just energy but transport. And when you do that, and that comes back to that circular economy thing of circular economy being able to potentially create an excess of or about €3,000 in addition of disposable income. When you do that, you can get to significant incentives for the household to change their behaviour, and then it becomes exciting. And this is generally what we came up with. And we made another. I'll say something about it in a minute, but we made another application to government at the end of our 6 months that said, look, this is what we've done, this is what we've found out, and this is the way we think we should be going. And everybody got terribly excited and said, yes, this is the way, this is going to lead the UK, and yeah, brilliant idea, and yeah, can you really make it work? And we're going, absolutely we can. But it was very much introducing electric vehicles to the island, and we know that it's a perfect place. There's no range anxiety here. That's another T-shirt. And putting what's called citizen energy community, but the community at the very heart of everything, and probably owning the energy and the intellectual property and all the rest of it, and in control of the local system. So probably definitely getting to the point where we are certainly energy self-sufficient and don't need to rely on external sources. Possibly at some point an exporter as well. And so we've created this concept of this ecosystem, and happy to go through it in more detail, but in essence, we're starting to look at both mobility as a service as well as energy as a service, and very cleverly just controlling everything and making it very smart that, I'll cut to the chase. I'll come back to that you could save maybe between $3,000 and $4,500 a year as a household. Now at that point, that becomes a significant of significant interest, and it's a win-win. And what we're doing alongside that is generating real benefit, but also moving us towards that rapidly towards that zero carbon economy. And you could see, significant potential for the tourist economy. Those 2 million visitors that visitors, and not surprisingly, the bid that we put in needed, more expertise and more partners, and we were asking for more money. And so that was the partners that went in. Now, government in their wisdom thought we're maybe a bit too risky. We're asking for a bit too much public money. So we didn't get funded, and when you look at what was funded, safe certainly, and good luck to them. But it puts us at this point of we had an exciting idea, we still have an exciting idea, we still want to take it forward. I guess at this stage I'm looking for feedback, for input. I know that there's other things going on. It might be that we get a bit more disruptive, we can do it a different way. Or actually, is this something that isn't that attractive? But I think it's generally one of the ways, and if you set that in the context of things like the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, the really exciting stuff that some of the those agencies focused on the natural environment, like the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, National Trust, Natural Enterprise. They're looking at in terms of significantly exciting rewilding prospects and really changing the way that the health of the natural environment. If you link all that together and think about that big picture, I think we genuinely could become somewhere of significant note in this urgency towards our shift to a zero carbon economy. There is a website there. By all means, check it out. There is a mechanism to get in touch with me. So I'm just going to, on that note about collaboration, it is a jigsaw. I've thrown a few pieces at you, and hopefully they fit together. There's lots of other pieces. How do those pieces fit together? I'm a big fan of a collective brain. So this is about crowdsourcing solutions. I think there is genuine, and we need this, but I think there's genuine case that we can make. It's not been made yet, and Westminster and others do not. They still see us as some sort of 1970s backwater. We're actually going back to the level of resources we should be in the 1970s, but let's not go there to now. And we're not, by the way. But I've used a lighthouse there. But how do we make that case? How do we demonstrate that genuinely, a bit like with the app, we are a place that can demonstrate to the rest of the world and certainly to the nation how it's done? And how do we collectively enhance and harness the innovation that I know and we know is here? Lots of questions. Sorry, I said that there'll be more questions. And by all means, just stick it up on the chat or get in touch. So that's, I guess, where I'm coming from. Just a few thoughts, stuff that chimes with our new new priorities as Future South. The Green Tech South stuff, the business support stuff. If you know someone that might benefit from that, then just go and check it out, greentechsouth.com. If you don't like social media, then by all means, I was about to say drop an email, but that's a bit digital too. But stick on a chat, ask somebody to get in touch with you or something. But at some point you will get to talk to a real person. In terms of the Future South agenda, this, I was just kicking it off and opened my big mouth and got stuck with it. But there are much better people coming along to talk about some of the elements of all of this big picture stuff. Just some of the things that will be coming to a screen near you every month from now on. But first of all, we're going to look at this idea of mobility for all and how do we make it work. Touch on the natural capital stuff, the value of water, energy hubs, the plastics revolution, or how we get away from the plastics. All sorts of stuff which hopefully will continue to feed the mind and generate discussion and debate and most importantly of all, I think, action. And there are various mechanisms to get in touch should you wish to do so. But other than that, that's my allotted time up. There may be a few questions. If you've been posting questions, I have no idea. I'm just kind of, as far as I'm aware, just sat here talking to myself on a computer, which is not unusual, I suppose. But hopefully there's some people out there. When I close my presentation, I'll get to know if there have been and the feedback from my team. But if people have been posting questions, comments, thoughts, I'll spend some time this afternoon going through those and responding to those. And I am a systems thinker. I do believe in using the networks that I and others are part of. So if I don't, have an answer, then I can send it out to the various networks that we have. And hopefully we can, in the words of David King, we've got 10 years. Hopefully we can make a big stride towards some significant change in the next 12 to 24 months, certainly while this webinar series is running. Thank you.
David, thank you very much. Virtual clapping around the rooms. Thank you very much for that. Fascinating insight, some great slides, some really, really interesting information packed into a 1-hour webinar. So congratulations on that. For those of you who would like to go back and do the quiz again, see if you can get your score below the 30 that I sadly got. This whole webinar has been recorded and will be available. My colleagues at Green Tech South will be sending it out later on. There have been a few questions come in on the chat function and also through to me via Twitter and other things. So I know you've been talking for an hour, but do we have 5 minutes more of your time just to run through some of these?
Yes. I also won't take offence if people have to go and do more important things. But yes, of course.
One of the most practical ones, is there a way to have green holidays on the Isle of Wight?
Well, you could. Yes, it depends what sort of holiday you want, doesn't it? I mean, there's a great campsite. What's it called? Camp White, I think, which has compostable toilets. You can easily cycle across. It's just near Yarmouth. There are many others. We just happen to like that place. It has little individual pitches nestled in the trees. You can collect a bit of firewood. They have old washing machine drums on car tire hubs, and then that's where you kind of burn your wood. So that's just one of many places. I think increasingly so. I mean, there is a colleague of mine, so I'm involved a little bit with, well, I'm involved with Future Isle of Wight, and through that, a colleague of mine, Vince, is really keen, and I know he's been talking to some of the team about how you might develop an app that could help people make those choices. But yes, it's possible. That's just one example, cycling across and camping, but that I know isn't for everybody. There are many other organisations. I guess Visit Isle of Wight would be the first place to start and go and look. Well, up until now, we live here and are very blessed with living here, but we don't tend to holiday here. So you might be asking the wrong person.
Okay, somebody's just actually commented and said they love to come over there and camp there, so you've already been endorsed once. Next question before we go to the chat room. You said that you mentioned the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and in my experience, it's always been a sort of dealt with corporate leaders around the world. Is the Solar Impulse one that you mentioned, is that aimed more at businesses, small businesses, medium-sized businesses?
Yeah, Solar Impulse Foundation is an interesting one. So that's Bertrand Piccard, and he's the guy that built the solar powered plane and then flew it around the world a few years ago, and has started his own foundation. And you know, like with everything, you know, it's an independent foundation with some great ideas, and they're very focused in what they're trying to achieve. And they're looking for stuff that you can take off the shelf now and can effectively be presented to cities and policymakers and decision makers and buyers as a list of 1,000 potential solutions that will take you now into a much better position in terms of a zero carbon economy. And absolutely, I mean, we have some of our SMEs that have applied for that, and through getting that badge, their product is on the list and is being advertised as something that's available now as an alternative to more carbon intense technologies and solutions. I think other things will come along, and in terms of our island solution, it may be that some of those are things that we use, but we may want to push the envelope a bit further. I don't know. But yeah, from a business perspective, it's a good place to start, and certainly we've already had businesses that have benefited from that opportunity of having a well-endowed large organisation and shouting about the technology that they already have that is commercially available that could be seen as part of the alternative solution. I think in terms of and some of those could be also thought of as part of the circular economy as well. So when you start thinking about waste not as rubbish but as a resource, and starting to think about, after you've minimized it and all the rest of it, then doing things with what's left. And the fact that I know that we've had conversations about this, but the fact that as an island we collect our food waste and then we have to ship it off island is a bit daft. And actually I think there's lots of little ideas around, whether making energy from some of the seaweed that washes up, or we already have some anaerobic digestion and waste conversion, but if we can take the food waste as well, and then it might be that we've got lots of little hubs around the island that are generating I don't know, fuel for vehicles and stuff like that. But I think we could do anything we want. It's just how we do it and the best way of doing it. Sorry, I'll try to make my answer shorter.
Last question from me before we pass over to our attendees. You've obviously set your office up in a really nice place there, and I'm just thinking, after the COVID crisis is over, do you think we're just going to go back to business as usual, or do you think this has been a sea change now in how we work with each other?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, at the personal level, we've had discussions about, neither of us, and you're fine with this because you talked about it with your boss, but I haven't talked about it with mine. But neither of us can see a scenario where we are back in work 5 days. Well, we're working, but we're not in the office 5 days a week. I think there's certainly, we have definitely demonstrated that most things from our point of view, not everything, but can be done from a shed on the Isle of Wight. In my case, I'm not on the beach, although that is Aptley Beach for those that are interested. I've never been to the island. It's my local beach. It's not some place in the Caribbean. It is the Isle of Wight. So from a personal level, almost definitely, because that's in our control. The level of communities and of nations and of cities, I have no idea. I think Amsterdam are doing some interesting stuff around the donut concept. I think that was already in their sites, but they're using this to rapidly move more towards that idea. Copenhagen have come out and said that they want to try and do some stuff. I think London have too, to a degree. It's hard, isn't it? How much of it is up to our elected leaders to make these decisions? You kind of hope that we won't miss this opportunity, but I think naturally some places that are perhaps further ahead than others will absolutely, and are doing, embracing the opportunity and trying to make the most. I mean, that's where you could argue we owe it is, make the most out of the despair and the destruction to do some good. But honestly, yeah, absolutely, everybody should be thinking, let's not go back to business as usual. Let's go for the business as unusual. What does that look like, and how do we get there, and what elements of this enforced living can we take into a post-COVID society? But yeah, I think with all these things, I go right back to the beginning, to the context I set. I mean, we, those that identify with me, are still in the minority. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much. I mean, I'm slightly concerned because one of our colleagues has said that he scored very well on your quiz, said who needs a bath once a week. So I think I prefer to work from home. So anyway, picking up the questions from our attendees, Ian Boyd has asked, can you connect the carbon dividend per household to local funding of next steps, innovation, financial resilience? I'm not sure I understand.
No idea, Ian, but let's have a chat about it, because that sounds like something that we could do, or at least look at.
Next question, John Cullum. Is there a hub or focus group that tests and proves concept of energy efficiency solutions to support wider knowledge sharing and adoption of new proven technologies?
There's probably too many. That's half the problem. It's a complicated area. I mean, I can talk from personal experience on this one. So I wanted to believe, and I wanted to commit to renewable sources of electricity. I have a house in Ryde, so I'm on gas, and this dreadful man, and I won't say his name, came and missold me as it happened. But I was an air source heat pump and solar panels, and I've tried to keep the air source heat pump going, but when you're on gas, the economics of it just didn't stack up, and I'm happy to talk about that offline sometime to anybody that wants to listen. But so I've been through it, but it's really hard individuals certainly and businesses to know where to go and how to make these decisions, which is why, you know, I said on that initially we thought we'd start with the homeowner, but actually that's not necessarily the right place to start, and that's why we've turned it on its head, and it's to create services that people then want to become part of. I think that's much more the case. So, you know, there are many instances where, and I know B&Q did this many years ago, offered home insulation for free, and for whatever reason people just don't want to take it up, partly because maybe there's a load of crap in your loft and you don't want the hassle of sorting it out. And that was the only time they had a bit of success, is when they linked it with the offer of emptying your loft for you, sorting through everything, taking what you didn't want to the charity shop or wherever, and then putting stuff back once they'd insulated it. But people say we may decarbonise the aircraft industry, and certainly will at the moment, but the aircraft industry before we get to the domestic home market, because for various reasons it's very difficult. But anyway, so I mean, the Carbon Trust is still pretty good and they've got a good website, but actually I think part of the problem is that there's lots of places where you can go, and that's confusing. I think in time that will become more simple. So that, yeah, doesn't help with the question necessarily. There isn't a one-stop shop. There's lots of little places to go and find stuff out. But there are, I don't know if Colin Palmer's on the call, but there are people like Colin and Vince and others who have just kind of lived and breathed this stuff. And actually, if you can corner them for 15 minutes and just ask them all the questions you have, that's often as good a place as any. So use the fact that, you know, we say that there's 6, if you're on the island anyway, 6 degrees of separation on the mainland, but it's probably only about 3. So if you don't know either of those people, you'll know somebody, or know somebody who knows somebody that does, I would think. And yeah, I'm sure they would be more than happy to just sit for 20 minutes and tell you their stories like I could tell you mine, and that might be a way to go.
Thank you, David. We are overrunning a little bit here, so I'm going to come up with the last question. But just to let everybody know, there's quite a few comments and offers of help or assistance in the chat function. We'll make sure those are available to you. If you can't get into there now, we'll make sure they're available to you afterwards. So, final question comes from Sally Beacon, and she said, how do you think we can get behaviour change to happen when humans are very often driven by greed and convenience?
So I think, and this is just a personal, but I think half the challenge has been, again, we've set all this in this context of a linear economy, and that's what's made it difficult. And I completely buy into the concept of sustainable development, but it just, for whatever reason, hasn't worked in the way that it should. I think circular economy definitely has something to offer. And the beauty of circular economy is that the individual, the person buying the stuff, doesn't need to know anything about it, and indeed doesn't need to be told to change their behavior. So that because the thing has been rethought through design, and because the product that is then being sold or marketed, or the service that's out there, has been thought about in the context of a circular economy, it's actually the case that you can still do consumerism. It's just that you buy lots of the thing, and it's having a net positive effect on environment, society, and economy. Which, when you say it out loud, sounds a bit far-fetched, but actually there's lots of examples now where that is happening, and there are companies that have been on that journey for a long time, and everybody cites great island companies like Rapa Nui for things like that, but there are many others, island and off island. So to some degree you've got to find ways where you are not reliant on changing behavior because of those reasons, or you incentivize. So that's what we found with the what's now Project Isle, and Isle stands for I Save with Local Energy, by the way. But with Project Isle, just by offering people a potential to save on their energy bill isn't enough. If you link it with a transport service, be that in some cases a free electric car, and certainly massively reduced energy costs and transport costs, then you get to a point where you potentially could be saving £4,500 a year, and that's not then insignificant, and people will start to change behaviour for that. So it's going back to this, this idea of you know, you can. We've shown, but it's not a balance. You can have economic growth in the right ways, and you know, not have complete environmental destruction. There are lots of examples of that, and we need to just keep generating more and more. But I think that's the nub of it, is to do it in a way that doesn't mean you're slapping somebody over the wrist and the back of the hand and telling them off every 3 seconds, and actually you're finding mechanisms that are win-win, and there are lots of those that exist now.
That's great. Sally's actually just put a note on saying she totally agrees with you, David. So well done. Sincere apologies to everyone who hasn't had a chance to ask a question. I am sorry about that. We have recorded and kept a copy of the chat, so there's lots of information in there. I'd like to close the webinar by thanking David for incredible 1.25 hours with huge, valuable information there, which I hope everybody on this call got something out of that. I certainly did. The talent on the Future South board is one of our biggest, probably our biggest strength, and our next webinar will be on the 24th of June, when Nick Farthing, our Vice Chair, will be talking about mobility for all, dealing with transport, etc. So it only remains for me to say thanks again to David, thanks to those of you who have engaged and asked questions, and hope to see you all again on the 24th of June. So have a good day in the sunshine. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, David.